Welcome back on the AM show. We'll be crossing over briefly for that breakfast confab, and my colleague there, George Riafe, actually bringing us up to speed. But we're kickstarting, call this a pot boiler for the conversation. On the back of the special prosecutor and what he's been telling us with regard to the Agyapa Royalties deal, there is the finance minister and his you can call it a rebuttal or reaction, quite a statement there. I'm interested in the bit about Imara and Databank, feeding into the conversation. But we're going to be engaging, shortly, Vitus Azeem, who actually is an anti-graft crusader, on the special prosecutor, this showing at this point in time, and whether it's too little too soon, and some of the other dynamics with regard to it. So let's dig in. Mr. Azeem, a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us on the AM show.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Right, so too little too late. Let's start from that angle. People were calling for Martin Amidu to come out on the back of what Shraj, Mr. Whittle, had put out there. This is another angle when it comes to the Agyapa deal. Too little too late?
Well, is it not better to be late than never? This could save us, the country, huge sums of money. So even if it's late, I think it's still commendable.
Right. And based on what was said, quite the language is rather stern, if you like, in terms of what exactly the contents of the deal are. And now His Excellency, the President, has directed that the matter be taken back to Parliament, re-examined, and, only God knows where it will lead from there when Parliament takes a second look. The right step to take at this point in time, because, mind you, the Finance Minister has said that they have acted above the board when it comes to this situation. But the Special Prosecutor is on another tangent altogether. Apt move by Mr. President?
Well, if I had a chance to advise the President, I would suggest that he should avoid further embarrassment to his government by sending the matter back to Parliament. He should just withdraw it. Because it's not just what the Special Prosecutor has come out with. There were already concerns about this whole deal by civil society, by the minority, and by other analysts and well-meaning Ghanaians. And so if the Special Prosecutor has come out to confirm all these concerns, and you said the language was very strong. You see, when you are fighting corruption, sometimes you have to be very strong because you get emotional. You see certain things that should not be done, and yet they are being done, and it angers you, and you are compelled to use a certain language. Don't forget the Attorney General's even advice, which he later withdrew. Your own Attorney General advice, initial advice against this transaction. And you are sending it back to Parliament. The same Parliament that did a bad job. You are sending it back to them because you have a comfortable majority in Parliament. What do you expect from this Parliament?
Mr. Azeem, are you suggesting, now you said that to avert an embarrassment, they should have just, squashed it or not let it go back to Parliament. But by what you are insinuating, are you suggesting that basically it's a bad deal and so we shouldn't even be taking a second look at it? Don't you think, since we've contemplated this in the past, even under the NDC, maybe this might be a way to go for the country, but it simply has to do with tweaking it to suit the general interest of the people. Don't you think so?
Even if it has, yes, that is a fact. But then, what is going to change in the document that is going back to Parliament, which considered the same document? It is not just that the whole issue is not right, but the fact that the processes that it went through smelled of something wrong.
What are some of the processes? What are some of those processes that you can point to?
You have referred to the Special Prosecutor's report. He's mentioned some of these things. I don't have the document wholly now.
Right.
But you've mentioned some of the things that were not proper. And that's why he says it is. He has determined that there's a high risk of corruption in the whole transaction. That means individuals were involved who took their personal interest above that of the interest of the country. Corruption is abuse of public power, use of public power for private gain. So if you just look at it basically from that point of view, are you going to withdraw those individuals from the transaction? And how long is the president and the finance minister going to do that within this week? Because Parliament is also going to rise. Most of them are even in the field campaigning. And this is a very serious matter to the country. Why should it go back to this very Parliament that did the job that we're not satisfied with, that the special prosecutor was not satisfied with?
Is that to suggest, Mr. Azeem, that the president's call is, so to speak, much ado about nothing? Because in the end, the MPP has the majority in Parliament, and it is very likely that it will still be pushed through. Is it to say then that this is just a face-saving enterprise?
Well, that's how I look at it. Yes, I've sent it back to Parliament. Then Parliament may do one or two things and get it back to you. Parliament has approved it. And then if you are not satisfied, you're going to go back to the same special prosecutor or some other person to do a further analysis. So why don't we just say, let's put a hold on this so that after the elections, we'll take a second look at it.
Right. Now, in terms of the language used by the special prosecutor, one of the expressions used there is bid rigging. Bid rigging. And that sends quite a message. It says a lot, especially when you consider even the response of the finance minister directed at the office of the special prosecutor, addressed to the president. When you look at the short list of companies, 8 of them that were actually put forth, written to, by our end, and eventually Imara coming through higher than Morgan Stanley, you would realize that Imara was represented locally by Databank. Is that part of the context of the bid rigging we should be looking at? Is that part of what makes this deal a bad one? Because in fact, right from scratch, certain interests were paramount over the national one.
Even if it's not bid rigging, even if you don't refer to it as bid rigging, the CEO of the Public Procurement Authority has been removed because of conflict of interest. So this particular deal too, when you are referring to data bank, there is some conflict of interest there. And the special prosecutor has mentioned some former employees or something of data bank that were involved in this transaction. And you see, when you're the finance minister, there are certain things that you should avoid involving yourself in, especially if you stand to benefit. Because you go back to Article 284 of the Constitution. It's very clear. A public officer should not put himself or herself in a situation where his or her personal interest shall conflict with the interest of the state. So that alone could have even been enough for the special prosecutor to say that it is a potential corruption risk.
Now, beyond what is actually mentioned by the special prosecutor in his release, in his report, I should say, it's a pretty damning verdict. And you have said that, well, it should at least be pushed to next year if it's not going to be quashed at all. But it still stands that Parliament is going to take a second look at this. What would you proffer for the august House of Parliament? They often complain about insufficient time to go through massive volumes of documents. What would you proffer this time, since Parliament will be taking a stab at it a second time?
Well, I think when the civil society groups were talking, they also looked at the analysis, how you arrive at the amount that were given out and all that, the length of time that is involved in with this transaction is going to cover. And then you weigh that against the benefits that the costs that we are going to incur as a country. So that is another issue. Apart from the looking at the processes that were probably wrong and may smack of or have potential corruption, the figures, the volumes of revenues that we are going to lose as a country, the monies that have already been paid to certain people because of services that they rendered. These are issues that we need to look at as well.
Well, so very interesting times ahead. But Mr. Azeem, since this borders on corruption as well, and since the special prosecutor has been giving us some information on the matter, I just want us to delve briefly into the Airbus saga, the scandal. The special prosecutor now says he is convinced that government official 1 is well, the former president, John Dramani Mahama, and that he is only holding himself back from interrogating him because he is going into an election. In fact, he cites the fact that his mere place as flag bearer of the NDC is preventing him from interrogating him. But corruption is corruption from where I sit. What do you think of this matter? An apt move by the special prosecutor, or should he be willing to tackle the matter now before election 2020?
I don't know what the law says with regards to this situation. We have a month to elections, whether it is proper or whether it is even legal. I mean, it's okay for him to go ahead with the investigation. But I think that he's done some investigation that has made him to conclude that public officer one is the former president. So I think that there's a need to continue the investigation, even if it is after the elections. But there's a need. This should not bring finality to the matter. There's a need to continue the investigation.
But
for the interest of the country and even for the interest of the individuals that are accused.
Precisely, and I feel there's a moral responsibility owed the people of Ghana, a bit of a moral conundrum, if you like, because on one hand, some people may say he is being, quote, vindictive because of certain things we know about, well, that has been put out there with regard to his relationship with the NDC. But on the other hand, we also know that the fight against corruption must remain alive, and we would create the picture where, should this candidate become president, what are we going to do afterwards? Are we now, post-fact, going to investigate a president if he becomes president? Don't you think that would be too little too late?
I think so. And maybe the best thing would have been for him to just keep quiet over it until after the elections, or to continue with the investigations. When you come out and say he's a government official one, you are already putting him in a certain situation. You've already put him in a certain situation that can influence the results of the election, the outcome of the election. So either you just kept quiet and continue your investigations, or you put a hold on it until after the election. But now you come out to make this. I don't know the implications. And that's what I was saying. I don't know whether there are legal implications as well involved. But whatever the case, I think that whether before election or after the election, I think that there's a need for further investigations to bring finality to the matter. Very
finally, Mr. Azeem, just a very brief one. In the place of Martin Amidu, what would you have done? Would you have held on? Would you have gone full throttle with an investigation? What would you have done as an anti-graft crusader?
I think that if he has already started doing investigations, I would have continued. Although I might not release the report, but I would have continued with the investigations until after the elections.
Mr. Azeem, thank you very much for speaking to us this morning on the AM show.